It was a quiet afternoon in Seoul. The kind that usually slips by without much notice. When the press found itself shaken by a revelation so tender, so unexpected, that it left even the most seasoned journalists at a loss for words. At the Seoul Arts Center, where Son Ye-jin appeared for what many assumed would be just another friendly talk with the media, she delivered a confession that turned into a global headline. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled. But no one was prepared for the words that fell from her lips, words that forever reshaped how fans see her husband, Hyun Bin. No one knows. Hyun Bin has quietly been doing this for me all this time, she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray the emotion in her chest. And hung in the air like a haunting melody. For a brief moment, the room went silent. A hush fell over the audience, the weight of her words settling into every corner of the hall. And then the whispers began, reporters exchanging glances, fans clutching their phones. The world suddenly desperate to know, what had Hyun Bin been doing all this time, so quietly, that even those closest to them had never guessed? As Son Ye-jin continued, the story unfolded like a love letter written in invisible ink, now finally revealed under the light of her truth. She shared that her husband, one of Korea's most sought-after actors, had been turning down projects, big ones, national ones, projects that could have cemented his status as a global superstar, just so he could remain by her side. It wasn't something she had asked for, nor something he had ever boasted about. It was a choice he made quietly, in the shadows of their home, sacrificing the glory of Hollywood lights for the soft glow of a night lamp watching over his family. She admitted that there were times she didn't even realize the magnitude of his decisions. He never announced them. He never framed them as sacrifices. He would simply say, "I'll wait for the right project," or, "I want to be here with you and the baby for now." Only later did she come to understand that for now was his way of choosing love over ambition, family over fame. The audience leaned in as she recalled one particularly difficult period, the months after she gave birth to Al Kong, their baby boy. While the world outside speculated endlessly about her postpartum recovery and potential return to acting, inside their home, Hyun Bin had already made his decision. He was offered a role in a major international co-production, a film that promised not only staggering pay but also a chance to work alongside Hollywood's most celebrated directors. Many actors would have leapt at the opportunity. Hyun Bin, instead, quietly declined. Son Ye-jin asked him why. His answer was simple yet profound: "Work can wait. But our baby's smile cannot." Her eyes filled with tears as she repeated those words at the press conference. The journalists were scribbling frantically now, but no shorthand could capture the raw tenderness of her tone. She wanted the world to know that behind the dazzling image of Hyun Bin, the suave actor, the box office king, the heartthrob of Asia, was a man who put his family above everything. Revelation spread like wildfire. Within minutes, social media lit up with fans praising Hyun Bin as the embodiment of a perfect husband. Hashtags trended across Korea, Japan, and Hollywood fan communities. Everyone wanted to know more about the quiet ways Hyun Bin had shaped his life around hers. Was this why he had been less visible on the international stage in recent years? Was this why he seemed to disappear from the spotlight, only to reappear in fleeting glimpses, holding his child, walking beside Son Ye-jin, simply smiling shyly in candid fan photos? As the evening sun dipped lower, Son Ye-jin offered more glimpses into their private life, and so intimate they felt almost sacred. She described how Hyun Bin would wake before dawn to feed their baby, how he insisted on carrying the weight of household tasks during her recovery, how he reminded her every day that she didn't have to rush back to the screen. "He told me that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone," she revealed. "He said, 'You've given life, Ye-jin. It's the most beautiful role you'll ever play.'" The room gasped at the poetry of his words. Words that sounded less like an actor's line and more like the deepest truth of a devoted husband. For Son Ye-jin, this was no small thing. A world where image is currency, where every decision is scrutinized by millions, Hyun Bin had chosen to put his wife and son first, quietly shielding them from the pressures of fame. She confessed that sometimes she felt guilty. Guilty that her happiness had come at the cost of opportunities he had set aside. But Hyun Bin never let her dwell on that. He would smile and say, "Happiness isn't measured by the movies I make, but by the memories we build together." Her voice cracked as she said this. and it was clear that the weight of gratitude and love was pressing on her heart. The audience, too, felt the heaviness. They had been granted access to a secret chapter of a love story that was never meant to be public. And yet, by choosing to share it, Jin had turned it into a universal tale, one that resonated with anyone who has ever longed for love that endures, that sacrifices, that whispers instead of shouts. Inside the hall, fans gathered in crowds, holding up signs with messages of love and admiration. Some cried openly, overwhelmed by the idea that even stars of such magnitude faced the same struggles, the same choices, the same sacrifices as ordinary people. In fact, Hyun Bin's quiet decision to prioritize family had made him more relatable, more human than ever before. Industry insiders later confirmed that Hyun Bin had indeed declined several significant projects. There were scripts from overseas, even offers to join streaming platform blockbusters. One producer anonymously revealed, he read them, he considered them, but ultimately, he said no. At the time, no one understood why. Now we do. By the time the press conference ended, Son Ye-jin's confession had ignited a firestorm of admiration across the globe. Every entertainment news outlet carried the story, pushing his name alongside words like devoted, sacrificial, and unwavering love. Yet amidst all the noise, the truth remained clear. Hyun Bin had never sought recognition for what he had done. He hadn't needed the world to know. He had only needed his wife and son to feel his presence. As Son Ye-jin left the stage, flashes burst once more, capturing her serene smile. She had done what she came to do, not to shock, not to scandalize, but to honor. She had lifted the veil on the man behind the legend, revealing a Hyun Bin the world had never seen. And in doing so, she reminded everyone that true love is not measured by grand gestures or public declarations, but by the quiet sacrifices made in silence, day after day, year after year. Began by describing what it meant to live with a man who had consciously stepped back from the peak of his career. Hyun Bin has been offered things you wouldn't believe, she said softly. But each time, he told me the same thing, that nothing was worth more than being present for me and our child. She explained that while the world only saw the glamorous side of stardom, behind the curtain was a life filled with exhaustion, endless schedules, and the constant demand to be perfect. Hyun Bin could have chased that perfection forever, but he didn't. He chose instead to embrace imperfection, the messy hour of early mornings, the sleepless nights of parenthood, ordinary struggles that most stars pay others to handle. And he embraced them with joy. I remember one night when Alkong wouldn't stop crying. She said, her eyes misting. So tired I couldn't even stand. But Hyun Bin picked him up, walked around the house for hours, humming softly until Alkong finally slept. When I woke up, I saw them both asleep on the couch, head tilted back, the baby in his arms. I just stood there and cried. Because in that moment, I realized he had already given up so much to give me peace. The interviewer leaned forward, asking if she ever worried that he might regret his choices. Ye-jin shook her head. He never shows regret. He only shows love. When I press him about the roles he passed on, he laughs and says, maybe later. Right now, I'm exactly where I need to be. She went on to reveal that Hyun Bin had even rejected the chance to work with some of his idols in Hollywood. There was one script, she said, would have paired him with one of the biggest names in cinema. When I found out he had said no, I was stunned. I asked him why, and he just smiled and said, because I didn't want to miss Alkwang's first steps. At this, her voice broke. The raw honesty of the moment struck like lightning. Hyun Bin had traded the immortal legacy of a Hollywood blockbuster for a fleeting, fragile moment in his living room, a moment that could never be repeated. And yet, to him, it was the only choice that mattered. Son Ye-jin admitted that she sometimes wrestled with the guilt, worried that one day, he'll look back and wish he had taken those roles, that he'll feel like he lost something. But then she recalled the words he always tells her, what I would have lost, Ye-jin, is time with you. That's something no movie could ever give me back. As her story spread, it began to redefine what fans thought love looked like. No longer was Hyun Bin just the dashing hero on screen, he was the unsung hero at home. Fans began to share their own stories of partners who had sacrificed for love, drawing inspiration from his quiet strength. Social media flooded with messages like, This is the kind of love we all dream of, and Hyun Bin has raised the bar for husbands everywhere. Fellow actors began to speak out. One of his co-stars revealed, "I've seen Hyun Bin on set when he had every reason to chase bigger dreams. But his mind was always with his family. Kind of man he is, committed, loyal, unwavering." By the time Son Ye-jin finished telling her story, it's clear that she hadn't shared it to boast or to glorify her marriage. She had shared it to honor the truth, that behind every successful woman is often a man who believes in her so deeply that he is willing to step aside. And in her case, that man happened to be one of the most famous actors in the world. The interview drew to a close. She offered one final reflection. When people talk about Hyun Bin, they talk about his movies, his looks, his fame. When I talk about him, I talk about the way he makes her son laugh, the way he makes me feel safe, the way he chooses us over everything else. It's the Hyun Bin I know. That's the Hyun Bin I want the world to know. Her words were a love letter disguised as a confession. They reminded everyone listening that fame fades, beauty changes, and careers rise and fall. But love, the kind built on sacrifice, choosing each other again and again, endures. The world learned the truth. No one had known what Hyun Bin had been doing all this time. No one had guessed the depth of his devotion, the quiet power of his choices. But now, thanks to Son Ye-jin's voice, the secret was out. And it was not just their story anymore, it was a beacon of hope for anyone who still believed in love that whispers instead of shouts, in sacrifice that speaks louder than applause. As she left the interview, holding her husband's hand, the cameras caught one final image, Hyun Bin looking at her with the same quiet devotion he had shown all along. And though the world finally knew what he had been doing in silence, it was clear that for him, nothing had changed. He would continue to love her, quietly, endlessly, as if no one were watching.